Now, my mother actually moved to New York from this town that we lived in, where I was born and raised, called Hazleton in northeastern Pennsylvania. And I grew up in my grandmother's home. I went to the same school, St. Gabriel School, for 12 years. I lived in a neighborhood on Elm Street, 3 blocks from that school. And during those 12 years of grade school and high school, my dad still lived in that town where he was born and raised and grew up. But I seldom saw my dad. When I did see him, though, I would always see him in this Irish neighborhood bar where he spent most of his time.
And in our society then, and I don't think it's changed much today, the real philosophy of our society, the real religion, if you will, of our society, is rugged individualism. And I was a part of it. And I wanted to be a successful part of it, and that was my life. To the neglect of everybody and everything. Because part of being a successful artist is to be driven, and anything that distracts you from the pursuit of excellence in your art must be cast away, including family, including friends. I mean, everything has to be focused on success.
During this fast-forward life, I had encounters with many interesting people, and I learned a lot, and among them was my desire to learn about brain. I was a neuropathologist.
And I went to St. John's University in New York City. And in my freshman year, I did something very inexplicable. You see, after watching what had happened to my dad from drinking, I thought that I would never drink. But in my freshman year at St. John's, I wanted to become part of this popular fraternity on campus. And I went to a pledge party one night, and of course everybody was drinking beer. And I wanted to join. I wanted to be part of it. So I began to drink that night. And the next morning I woke up. And when I woke up, I felt terrible. I went into the bathroom. I looked in the mirror. I looked sickly, pasty, and gray. But I started to remember that night before when I was drinking beer, too much beer. And what I remembered was that this craving that I had inside of me, probably from the time that I was 5 years old, this craving suddenly vanished during that period of time that I had been drinking. And I thought to myself, I guess there really is something about this drinking.
I used to think that there was somehow, there was a place in the core of my being, like in my heart, where there was something terribly missing. There was just nothing there at all. So the way that I tried to anesthetize myself from the pain that caused was with alcohol and busyness and success and power and pleasure and stuff like that.
I got married pretty fast. I knew my wife only an hour and a half, and we are still together 26 years. Thank God for her. And I went to government and asked them, can I go now? They said, no, you cannot. You have to have at least children. You know, in 3 months you cannot do that. It's 9 months is 9 months. So we waited until Greg was born. And I asked for exit visa to go to the United States, and somehow they allowed me because there was nothing to block me anymore. But the work which I did on ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and some other glutamates and neurotransmitter cocktail can develop in a brain some kind of access to love-hate situations. So KGB used it for brainwash, and they didn't want me to go, so they decided to kill me.
I decided to drive west, and I actually decided I was going to drive all the way across country to California. And as I was driving along, not really thinking about anything in particular, a new song came on the radio. A song by Harry Chapin called "A Cat's in the Cradle." First time I heard the song. And it's a song about a dad and his son. And it starts out When you coming home, Dad? I don't know when, but we'll get together then. We're going to have a good time then. And as it goes on, you hear the son saying, I'm going to be just like you, Dad. You know, I'm going to grow up just like you. And then later on, you hear, when you coming home, son? I don't know when, but we'll get together then. We're going to have a good time then. And I started to cry tears, real tears, for the first time since my dad died. And as I'm driving down the road, it seemed almost as if the car took on a life of its own. And what happened was, I looked into the rearview mirror, and in that rearview mirror, I thought I saw the ghost of my dad in the back seat. And I just stared into that mirror at this sad, defeated image of my dad. And suddenly I heard the very last line in the very last verse of this song, not through the melodious voice of Harry Chapin. I heard this last line through the gruff and graveled voice of my dad. And what I heard was, he's grown up just like me. My boy, he's just like me.
In 1985, I took a group of students along with my wife on an art tour. Last day of the trip, the next day we would be leaving. We were going to drive back to Schiphol in Amsterdam and fly out. And they were all still getting up and getting ready, and we were in my room, and I was talking to one of my students, Monica Schoner. My wife was there, and I was saying, you know, like, can you go get, you know, the people ready? Like, you know, this is our last day, like, let's get going here. And this was at 11 o'clock, so they were being real lazy about getting going. They're just pooped, worn out. And I was talking to her, and in the middle of a sentence, I just collapsed down to the ground.
And the day I was leaving the Soviet Union, and my wife and my child was already in airport waiting for me to say goodbye, I was run over by car when I was standing in front of the cab stop. This car appeared from the right of big bus and then jumped on the sidewalk and avoided one tree and another tree as a slalomist, went even avoided my suitcases and then hit me. I flew for 10 meters, I fell down, and this car runs over me, then backs it and runs again over me, but that part I don't remember. Only memory which I have of encounter this car and my flying is a moment of hit. That's the moment which I remember. The red color of the car and my thought that the car is not so big, you know, to kill me. That's what my thought was. And then I'm in blank.
Now, to take you back to that evening, suffice it to say at this point that I was involved in an altercation in my nightclub in West Hampton Beach. And during this altercation, I was actually attacking someone, and he was defending himself. And I was in a rage. And when that happened, I stumbled down a staircase in the nightclub and out into an alleyway. You see, at the time, although I wasn't physically injured, I was hyperventilating. My breathing was out of control. And as I stumbled out into that alleyway, I realized that the harder I tried to breathe, that the less air I was getting. And that became more and more difficult. And I was at a certain point where I realized I was about to pass out. And I thought to myself, this is it. This is how it's all going to end. And I saw a friend walking toward me down the alleyway. And I went to inhale deeply to call out to him. And as I did so, in a nanosecond of time, I felt my lungs collapse, my heart stop beating, and inexplicably, I looked up into the night sky for help. And I felt my head explode, and my body collapse to the sidewalk.